There has been a just recent blow up online, as you know, there always is about something about the issue of marriage, and recently some of those in the so-called red pill community, those who are upset about feminism and are discussing the problems of feminism in our society, have started to speak out against marriage, really encouraging young men just not to get married at all, because the supposedly statistics about marriage are so bad that most of them are unsuccessful, and therefore it's not worth the risk. So you just shouldn't get married at all. Now, and I've said this before, that I think that when you're looking at the red pill movement, and largely very young guys are attracted to this, and I get why, right? But I've said this before, that I think that the challenges that they are responding to are challenges that are really significant and important in our society. But the answers that a lot of the red pill type movements and influencers, people on social media give, are just extremely harmful to young men and extremely harmful to society. And instead of aiming young men toward the good, they tend to feed off of young men's anger and push them toward making decisions or having opinions based upon anger, which is just not healthy for them, but it's also not healthy for society. So I don't think there's any question that marriage in our society today is not in a good place. And so I think that's just kind of obvious. Since no-fault divorce was legalized, it has become easier and easier for couples to get divorced. Things like the sexual revolution have really impacted the institution of marriage and how people view themselves and view sexuality and view one another and the relationship between male and female and just commitments more generally. I think there are a lot of factors in this. So it's clear that people who are talking about the problems in marriage are really pointing at something that's very important. I mean, I just think of so many men that I know whose wives left them, and their wives left them not because of some kind of infidelity on the man's part or some kind of abuse on the man's part, but simply because they wanted to leave. They were bored or felt restrained in their marriage, or they wanted to go off and do something else. So I totally understand why men are really angry and angry at the way that men are critiqued in broader society, the way that men are just seen as the problem. And you hear this constant voice from the culture and from our media that's patriarchy is destroying everything, and that there is this kind of evil power dynamic that men are the cause of all of the world's problems. And when you see these young men who are hearing that message over and over and over again, and they're looking around them and saying, look, I'm not treated well, I'm depressed, I'm miserable, and then everybody's blaming me just for the fact that I'm a dude for the things that are going on in the world. And how else are they supposed to respond but with anger? So the radical right, and I don't even know if I want to call it the right, really. So, but depends, the kind of post-Christian right, maybe you would want to say, is kind of an inevitability, and it was really created by the radical left. I mean, I think it's just the inevitable result. Because if you're constantly criticizing somebody and telling them that they're the problem just because they're a man, and they're not seeing all this supposed privilege that you're constantly telling them that they have, and men just simply are not doing well in our society right now, then of course you're going to have a reactionary, angry movement. What else do you expect to happen? But right now, I think we're seeing some of the results of that reactionary attitude. And this isn't anything new. Some of this has been around for quite a while, but there's been just a recent blow up. And so one of the solutions to the problems that are being faced in terms of marriage right now are just to say that, well, men shouldn't get married. So marriage is something that just, basically as a man, you're going to be in a position where you're giving everything to this woman, and she will likely just leave you, and then your life is going to be a mess, and you're going to be miserable. So you might as well just avoid getting married altogether. Now, that is no solution to anything, okay? The breakdown of marriage is the root of all of the problems that we're seeing in this area in the first place. And all of this really goes back to the sexual revolution, this idea that sex can just be divorced from the natural consequences of sex, which is having children, and can be divorced from the marital context, and that sex has now just become some kind of free consenting action between adults that is pleasurable. And that really is the root of a lot of the issues of marriage, if not most of the issues of marriage, and most of the issues with the way that people are viewing marriage in our society. So what the red pillars are doing right now and trying to argue against marriage is going back to the thing that messed the whole thing up in the first place, which is the sexual revolution. And this is why when you look at the red pill types, what they're doing is they're looking at women solely by the questions of, how attractive are they at what age, and who's more attractive than who, and what's a high value man. And it really has to do largely with how many women he can get. And so this red pill movement is really moving away from commitment in a marital relationship towards men just, I guess, try to get whatever women they want, but won't make a commitment because women are, doing all these terrible things to men. And that's no solution to anything at all. And that is exactly what is destroying society and what will destroy society. So here's the reality here. Marriage is the most fundamental, foundational institution of culture. In fact, all society and all of culture flows out of the reality of marriage. And so if you get rid of marriage or you destroy marriage, it's going to have profound implications for every other institution of society, right? If it's the foundational institution, you destroy the foundational institution, that all of a sudden starts to have ramifications in all of these other areas. And that can just be seen also in just studies of children who are raised with, one parent, or children who are raised with, someone has multiple partners, or versus someone who was raised in a home with a present mother and a present father. The one who has a present mother and present father that are married is going to have statistically the best outcomes because there is something natural about this. It is best for society. So if children are raised best in that household, then that has ramifications for what that child does with their life. You see this with like poverty statistics. The most clear indicator that somebody is going to be in poverty is that they are not married and have children out of wedlock and don't get married. This is just a reality that we're seeing in our society. And yes, you can talk about kind of what causes what, and there's plenty to talk about there. But the point is that even just looking at pure statistics themselves and the psychological outcomes for children, it's clear that what is going to be the best thing for society and for future generations is not to get rid of marriage because women are bad, but instead to strengthen marriage, to have marriage once again be this foundational institution and be seen as and accepted as this foundational institution through which all other institutions come. How do we encourage young men is really the question then that this gets to, because there is a significant real problem that's happening right now. And I see this just in being involved in campus ministry, working with both young Christian men and young Christian women, is that on both sides, there are significant difficulties in finding a spouse. There's a fear that, they'll never get married. And on the side of the men, I consistently see that they feel like it's hard for them to find a woman who aligns with their values because women do tend leftward, and this is going to be a really significant this is going to have a really significant effect on culture. That right now what we're seeing is young men are becoming more conservative and young women are becoming more liberal. This is just going to be a huge issue because if you have completely different values, your relationship is probably not going to work out very well. So I see this with young men that they simply can't find women who really share their values or who will give them honor or respect. But then on the other hand, I speak often with young women, Christian college-age women, who say that they really want to get married. They desperately want to get married. Some of them, that's their highest goal in life, is to get married. But they simply cannot find a man who is not addicted to porn. That is a reality also that we have to face. And you don't just get to blame the women, because that's a huge problem. And you don't get to say, well, too bad, that's not a big deal. You got to be with the guy anyway and just deal with the fact that he's just constantly looking at other women. So there are issues on really both sides of the aisle here that we do have to deal with. So what can we do then? Well, what we can do is help people to understand the tools that they need to have a good marriage. If you know people whose values align and they don't know each other and they're around the same age and you think they would be a good couple, try to help them to find somebody and get them the tools that they need to have a successful marriage. So the reality is, and I see this because I'm a pastor, so I've married plenty of people. I've done plenty of premarital counseling. The reality is that the majority of people who are willing to use the tools that are going to create a healthy marriage, who are committed to marriage as something that is inherently lifelong, that they simply cannot just back out of, and of course with the exceptions that are there in terms of total infidelity or some kind of serious physical abuse or something, but generally understanding that this is not a kind of optional thing, and they're willing to communicate. They have the tools that they need. They're both committed to working through the problems they have. The people who have those tools and are committed to them are generally going to make their marriage pretty successful. Are things always going to be perfect? Of course not. That's not how any social institution works. That's not how life works. We're sinners and we live in a fallen world. So that's just the reality of things. So we need to move away from these reactionary responses of just saying, don't get married. And if nobody gets married, it's literally going to just completely destroy society. Instead, move toward, we can't escape marriage, so maybe we need to just equip people. Maybe we need to stand alongside people and train them, train our children to understand what marriage is and what a commitment is. And take, if you're someone who is older and is married and has some good advice, maybe take some time to actually communicate with younger people. My wife and I have younger couples, that are thinking about marriage or are just married, come over to our house very regularly. We love to do this because we think that marriage is extremely important, and we want to encourage people in how to have a good marriage, how to make things function well. So there are plenty of things that we can do, and if you are somebody who's married, who's older, maybe instead of just complaining, maybe you should do the work, right? Go find some people that you can communicate with and give them advice. There are so many people that I've encountered, who my wife and I have encountered, who, when they started spending time with us, said things like, well, this is the first time I've seen a healthy marriage. Really someone that was close to them, at least, because of their parents or aunts and uncles and those who were part of their family just didn't have healthy marriages, and because of their upbringing and different factors depending on the person. But the fact is there are a lot of happy and healthy marriages, but if we don't go out of our way, those of us who are in a good relationship and feel like we've got some things to say and good, of course we make plenty of mistakes and everybody's going to, but if you don't go out of your way to really encourage and communicate with and build relationships with those who are younger, then they're not going to have anything else. And the fact is, if all you have is a bad model of marriage, and say you've had bad relationships and your parents had a terrible relationship, well, what else are you supposed to think? So go out of your way to try to communicate with those people who are younger and build those relationships and just encourage them. So anyway, hope you have found these thoughts helpful. Make sure you subscribe on here, and we'll see you in the next one. God bless.